Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to welcome you from the entire leadership team. Olivia, Brad, Robert, Jen, and I are all here today. We've got a great agenda coming up for you. We're going to start with the announcements, which are almost over. Dustin Schimek is going to talk about best practices in analytics governance. Jen and I are going to talk a little bit about choosing charts to display parts of the whole, spreading out measures across dimensions. Robert is going to talk about custom navigation buttons, and we're going to wind up with some great prizes in an audience poll. Today, we will have 3 prizes of either Tableau swag from the Tableau store, which you'll receive a gift certificate, or Andy Kriebel's book, 84 Charts in 80 Minutes. We'd also like to remind you that we do have a holiday party coming up on December 12th. It's in person in Madison. More to come from the audience poll on that of exactly where that will be. And without further ado, so that we can stay on schedule, to turn things over to Dustin, who has volunteered to introduce himself. Welcome, Dustin.
Yes. Hey there. Hey, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Hey, I'm Dustin Schimek, joining from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, over in the Milwaukee area today. Can you hear me okay? Someone just give me a thumbs up. Rob, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. Awesome. Now, the next thing will be to share my screen here, and let me do that in just a moment. All right. I was almost going to say joining from almost kind of warm Wauwatosa. I mean, I don't know if like 40 degrees is warm for everyone that's joining, but gosh, is it pretty mild in Wisconsin today, which is very welcome for those of us that have lived here for a while. I'm going to open up I only have a few slides. I'm going to be mostly hands-on for this one to keep it fun. I'm using my company's template here, but I'm really just joining to share some best practices on this topic of analytics governance. And I think it's a good time of year with end of year approaching, especially to talk about this. Talk more about that in a second. But just a little bit more about me. So I currently work for a company called Wisdom, which is in the analytics governance space. And we've got tools for testing on business objects reporting, Tableau reporting. I've been the product manager for our Tableau product, as well as Power BI too. We won't obviously talk about that here, but we do have products for all of those platforms. But my role is a technical evangelist, and I lead our analytics initiatives there as well. But I live over here in Tosa. The company is actually based out of Lille, France, so quite a commute from Wauwatosa, but I do work out of my home here. Previously, I've actually worked for a few different companies here in the Milwaukee area. Was fortunate to kind of have my analytics career launched here in Southeast Wisconsin. I was most recently a director of analytics at Masterlock, which is a manufacturer of padlocks and safety equipment that many of you, I'm sure, are aware of. Many of you probably had a dial padlock on your locker in high school or college. But really fun experience there, kind of building out analytics initiatives for Masterlock. Again, most previously. And then also I host a podcast called Data Ideas and co-host a conference in the industry called the Data Career Summit. And I actually co-host that with another Tableau ambassador, longtime Tableau ambassador, Brandy Beals, who lives here in the Milwaukee area too. I'm just a first-year Tableau ambassador, so I'm kind of a rookie at this. I have the sweatshirt on that they gave me because if you saw this morning, I posted a video on LinkedIn saying that I was super excited because I'm presenting at a local TUG here in Wisconsin, and it's my first time presenting at a TUG as a Tableau ambassador. So very special presentation for me from that angle as well. As I go through this, let me know if you have any questions in the chat. I can just try to address questions from the chat. I was going to leave a few minutes at the end here, but I've only got 25 minutes or so I want to go relatively quick. And again, drop questions in chat and I'll do my best to answer them. So that's me. I took a task off Rob's list there and promised, as he said, to introduce myself. I've got a disco ball up in front of us right now. And why the heck do I have a disco ball up? When we're talking about analytics governance, which is sometimes kind of feels like a dry topic, doesn't it? But I've got this disco ball up, not only because of that cool intro music that we had before the TUG kicked off, but because it really is this time of year that I really, think about all of the kind of struggles that I had around, making sure that my dashboards were in order and that my data was going to be appearing as expected in the right place at the right time. Because though those are things we think about all the time, especially the more content we have and the more complex it is, when end of year comes up, right now we're sitting here, 24, 25 days away from the end of the year. there's going to be some big changes oftentimes in our data and in our dashboards. And, sometimes those create issues. Like sometimes values don't appear in filters on January 1st like they did on December 31st. Sometimes year over year calculations and things like that don't really look like they should, or don't even work at all when the new year switches over, right? And so, I found myself, I always loved New Year's Eve. It's coming up here, right, in a little bit. But as I built more and more dashboard content and advanced in my analytics career and was responsible for it, sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of dashboards, I would find myself actually getting a little bit anxious towards the end of the year, because I wanted to make sure that all of, especially my most critical content that was being used, was going to look good on January 1st and work as it did on December 31st. And I found myself sometimes coming into the office in between, Christmas and New Year's and doing some checks, looking at those most critical dashboards, looking at my data sets, making sure that everything was in order for January 1st. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but I would love to hear if it does in the chat, and how you're preparing for the start of the new year here from a, data integrity and user experience standpoint for your dashboards. With that, I'm going to kick off. So I'm going to go into one slide here on kind of the formal title here: best practices in analytics governance, how to test, promote, and certify your Tableau content at scale. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's test right in, pun intended. Go right into the content here. And this is not, even though, like I said, I'm on Wisdom slide template, and Wisdom, offers products that automate testing and deployment and certification of your content. These recommendations I'm making aren't exclusive to whether you're using Wisdom or not. I mean, these are things that I would recommend you think about in terms of testing your content for accuracy and user experience, regardless of whether you're using Wisdom, and kind of regardless of the time of the year. It doesn't just have to be at the end of the year. It's important to do this kind of stuff on a regular basis. Could be for end of fiscal month reporting or quarterly reporting or things like that. So the first thing is kind of an obvious one, but, oftentimes I think we find ourselves not doing this at all. If we've got critical dashboard content out there, especially, in high volume, high complexity, we want to make sure that we have some process in place to test that content, to make sure it's working, to make sure filters have the right values that they're supposed to, make sure actions are working, to make sure that the data is valid that's in there. And oftentimes this gets lost in the shuffle. There's a lot going on. Analysts are very busy, and we don't always test. We oftentimes end up hearing about issues in our dashboards kind of after the fact. And I thought myself, there has to be a better way. And that was why I was excited to join this company that works in the analytics governance space, because it turns out that there is indeed. And so let's talk a little bit more about this. So this problem around testing. So, data ops and data governance initiatives, we often think of these as if we implement these, our data is going to be good and our dashboards are going to be good and we're going to have trust in the dashboards that users are using. But oftentimes what happens is, if you look at these three pillars on the left-hand side of this slide, we may have good governance around the collection, storage, and processing of data. But then as you look at the right-hand side of this slide, this analysis layer, this layer where we have users using dashboards, there's oftentimes issues that appear there and kind of sneak through, even if there was good data ops and data governance practices in place on the left-hand side of this slide. Just a few examples at the bottom here. You ever had a new column slip in, to your data set that your dashboard was using unexpectedly? When that happens, that can kind of wreak havoc on some of the content that's displayed in your dashboards. How about a data type change? How about the combination of those two things impacting a calculation? Maybe the year switches to, rather it goes from 2023 in 2022 to current year or prior year, CY and PY. Maybe that messes up a calculation. Just simple examples, but these are things that can slip through. Some validation processes on the data side of things, on the left-hand side of things, but then, we still have users with inaccurate dashboard views. I'm not going to read through all these, but let's look at the center of this slide. How many of you have ever had a user, be it a business leader or executive team member, pick up the phone and call you? Here in this example, we're saying it's a finance leader. Pick up the phone and call you and say, you know what, this report that I'm looking at, this dashboard, it has your name on it. that you published, it's not working. And there could be a number of reasons of why that is that they list off, right? But I need it for a meeting in 30 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Can you fix it? Sometimes we can, right? But sometimes there's also been things that have slipped through the cracks that we weren't aware of. And now it's going to take a heck of a lot more than 5, 10, or 30 minutes to fix that. And so at this point, it's kind of too late. That person isn't going to be able to present what they wanted to present in that meeting. And there might be some business value that was lost from that. There also might be some trust that was lost from it. So all the more reasons why you want to think about kind of a proactive testing process that you can put in place around your Tableau dashboards. I'm curious, I love the interaction. I don't see anyone. I love presenting in person. I don't see anyone. So if any of this stuff resonates, if you've ever gotten a call from someone that detected an issue and it was like, I should have had that fixed, but I didn't, let me know in the chat. I can tell you, I'll start right now. I've had this happen all the time. And it happens when you don't have a good testing process in place. Okay. I'm going to get out of the slides for just a second here, and I'm going to open a dashboard and just kind of talk through, like, in practical terms, what this might actually look like and what could automation look like around testing. Derek B says, happened to me. Totally. I'm on board with you. It's happened to me as well. So I've got this dashboard up, this Superstore Sales KPIs dashboard. And let's say that this is a critical dashboard at the company that I work for. Okay. And we've got some filters on here, some pretty typical functionality. Got a bunch of values in each of these filters, right? And let's say that there's some values that we always want to make sure are selectable. We always want to make sure that our users can select these 3 values that are shown here: furniture, office supplies, and technology. We always want to make sure that those are there. How many times have you ever had a value slip into a filter that you weren't expecting or that didn't belong there? Maybe, some sales get misassigned or don't get assigned at all. Maybe you get an unassigned product category slipping in here. And then now all of a sudden your users have 4 categories they're looking at, and they're not sure how to think about the unassigned sales, right? Or how many times have you had a value disappear when it wasn't supposed to? These are all things that happen all the time, right? And so kind of taking a step back just from a recommendation standpoint, I think end of year is a good time to do this. Think about what those most critical dashboards are and what's the most critical functionality in there that you want to test for, and what's the most critical data and values that are supposed to be there, and how can you validate those things? So that's just one simple example using filters. We've also got some other stuff down here, right? So we've got some KPIs, we've got a map, we've got some tables here, some bar charts. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong unexpectedly, right? And you think about if you've got 10 of these critical dashboards or 100 or 1,000, think about how many combinations there are of things that can go wrong, and then how long it takes to test for all of those things, especially if you're doing it manually, right? Let's play with me for a second here and just, say that we want to validate to make sure that we always have sales in every state. Let's say we do business nationally and we know we should always have at least some sales in every state. That might be a test we want to do. We want to make sure that we have all states loaded. Maybe we've, got sales by product type or a subcategory here, and we want to make sure we have all the right subcategories, and we want to make sure that these values, these measure values that are loaded here are accurate. Those might be some things that we want to test for if those are important to us, right? So just wanted to show this and then kind of tie it to how you can automate some testing for this using a tool that I've been product manager for called Wisdom, Ops for Tableau. And by the way, there is this little markup here in the upper right. This is actually an extension object that I added. We actually just released this. I'm not going to talk about it just yet. I will in probably 5 or 10 minutes, but we'll kind of hold on to that one for just a second here. I'm going to go into this automated testing tool called Wisdom Ops for Tableau. And, I mentioned in that dashboard, there was some filters, right, where there was 3 different product category values. And let's say that we always want to make sure those are present. I'm just going to show you a really simple example on how we could automate testing for something like that. Now I've set up a test to go through a series of steps to test for the presence of those values in the filters, and also see what the user experience is like with it. How long does it take for those to be selected? It might be a problem if Yeah, it's one thing if we can select one of those values, but what if it takes 100 seconds for that value to load? Has anyone ever had an issue where a user has said, gosh, whenever I select this particular product or this particular category, things blow up. It takes forever for it to load. I can kind of check for both of those things. I'm going to click on this reports tab right here. And rather than run the test and go through it right now, I'm just going to show you what you can actually end up seeing here using a tool like this. Is you can actually see, okay, did my viz open? Was I able to set that filter to this value furniture? What about to office supplies? What about to technology? What about setting it to all of the values? Does it work? These green check marks are telling me that it did. How long does it take? And then I threw this one for fun in there. Hey, we want to make sure we can always select Wisconsin and the actions around Wisconsin works. Right. So we can do all kinds of things to check automatically to make sure that our dashboard is working and that our user experience is good. We have, decent load times for each of those. Those are appearing here. I'm going to actually just, the only really demonstration I'm going to do of the product is I'm just going to hit run test once here, and I'm going to show you what this looks like and how our tool takes control of a dashboard to do these tests. So I'm going to run this simple one right now. Yes, I'm actually going to demo live, so I'm kind of taking a leap of faith here. Right. We've all seen demos where stuff doesn't work. But I kind of want to put my money where my mouth is with this one. So what happens is Wisdom is opening up automatically this browser. I'm putting my hands up. I'm gonna be like I'm jumping around at Camp Randall. I don't know if anyone has ever done the jump around at Camp Randall, but all right, I'm jumping up and down. My hands aren't on the keyboard, right? And Wisdom is controlling my browser. And it's actually, you see the product category filter. It's going through each of those values and selecting them to make sure we can select them. And then it's capturing how much time it's taking. Now, I said we want to select Wisconsin. Wisconsin's the most important state on that dashboard. We want to make sure the actions were working. You saw Wisdom selected Wisconsin just like I told you to, or told it to. And now it's telling me, was it able to do all those things successfully? And then how much time did it take to do those things? So just a simple test that we can do on user experience. We can do the same thing for validating data. I'm not going to run this test. I want to be cognizant of the time I'm allowed here, but we can do things like check for all the states in certain tables, check for all the product subcategories, make sure everything's appearing as expected as it's displayed in the dashboard. Check for all the states in the map. Again, check for Wisconsin. We want to, even though we checked for all the states, we want to double check for Wisconsin. Maybe we set up a test to make sure Illinois is not in there if we didn't want Illinois to be in there. You get the idea. We can also validate the sales data that's loaded in there. Make sure that those measures are meeting a set of rules that we assign to them and indeed are valid. They're not violating any business rules. Again, we can see whether things are passing or failing. If something's failing, we can actually drill into it and see what's going on. So for that issue with the data validation for sales, I put in a simple business rule. I want to check to make sure that the sales didn't exceed a threshold that they weren't supposed to. And I can see that this one did. And so it violated a simple business rule. Perhaps the users of this dashboard only manage product categories under a certain dollar amount. Well, maybe it's end of year, one creeped over that amount, and now it's time for that product to go and be managed by someone else. This is a way to get ahead of these things, know about these things instantly. You can actually schedule these using a tool that we have where these will run continuously every day or every hour, whatever cadence you want, so that you're notified right away if a rule is violated, a testing step fails, and something that's important to you and your most critical dashboards isn't working. So testing for sure is a big thing to think about. I'm going to go back to my deck, and I'm just going to actually open it from here. The next thing you might want to think about after you think about a process for testing, again, whether it's manual or using some automated tool for testing like Wisdom, you want to think about perhaps how you deploy content after it's tested. So you can do testing on content that's already in production, but also think about, ideally, you might want to do testing on content while it's not in production, right? You might want to have a project folder where you deploy content first, to like a dev project folder or a dev site or environment. Do the testing there first on that content. And then after it passes certain tests that you set up, you can actually automatically then deploy it to a production folder site environment. So the idea is, think about whether or not there's a place that you want to do the testing on first, where that content should be first. Then it gets tested, then it gets moved to a production environment where users actually see it. Again, you can test it while it's in production too, but could be more ideal to do the testing on something in dev And then after it passes the test, move it to a production environment. You can think about that. Deployment, we do automate that using Wisdom. So there's a step in here where you can actually, test a dashboard and then promote it automatically from one environment, be a project folder, site, whatever, to another. So thinking about that deployment of content, testing it in one environment before it moves into production is one recommendation. And then certifying. So there's this capability, called data source certification. I'm sure many of you are aware of in Tableau, where, the idea is you've got a data source that it's marked certified with a green check mark in Tableau. And then when those data sources are certified, you can have trust as a Tableau developer that the data is good and you can build a dashboard off of it, and that there's going to be no issues with the data accuracy of that data source, right? So we actually do, using the Wisdom automated testing tool, we actually can automate data source certification. So certify data sources after they pass a series of tests. But what we also just released is dashboard level certification. And we do this using a capability within our tool, as well as a Tableau extension that we just released. And so you saw that actually when I opened this dashboard, there was this statement up in the upper right corner, this dashboard is certified. So again, remember the data source certification. Now we're taking it a step further to actually allow a mark to be put on the dashboard to confirm that the dashboard has gone through testing and it's passed and it's now marked certified. And so it's working in conjunction with, if I go back to my tool here, think about some of these tests that I just ran on user experience and accuracy. What I can actually do is enable dashboard certification for these tests. And then if they pass, what's going to happen is if I go back to my dashboard, the dashboard is going to be marked certified. If they fail, they're going to be marked decertified. And again, keep in mind, you can set everything up so that you can get notifications if there's failures, so that you can get ahead of these issues proactively before that user calls you. But this also is a safeguard for users. If a dashboard is decertified and they're looking at it, they know I'm not going to make any critical business decisions based off of this. But if it's certified, they can know that the dashboards have passed through, a rigorous testing process and can be trusted. So it's just a way to kind of automate trust at scale without having to have all the verbal conversations around it. I'm just going to click edit. I'm in Tableau Cloud right now. I'm going to edit this and just show you some of the hidden content in that extension. I hid it just so it looks, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But if you wanted, you could actually expand this to show some additional detail. Here we go. You can see when the last test was. You can see I ran this last one. Keep me in check here, 11:49 a.m. Central Time. Looks right to me. Clock just turned to 11:56. And then a certification message too. And you can configure this yourself by clicking on configure and entering that right there. So that would be a message that a user could see. Now, again, you don't have to have Wisdom Ops for Tableau to use this. We actually make this extension available for free so that you can download this right off the Wisdom website, and you could use this to manually certify dashboards. So let's say you're doing manual testing of your dashboards. You step back this holiday season, think about those manual tests you want to do on maybe a few critical dashboards. You could also use this extension to display similar information. You just have to manually configure it, but it is available for free for non-Wisdom users. You just have to have Wisdom to use the dynamic capabilities. So I'm going to go back to my deck here, and the big three recommendations I have for you, and I think it's especially good to think about these things at the end of the year. Think about, how are you testing? What are you testing? What are your most critical dashboards? What's the critical functionality? And, what's the most critical data in there that needs to be accurate? Deploying content, are you just deploying content straight to production without doing any tests? Or are you deploying it to a dev environment first, doing some tests there, and then deploying it to production? And then 3, certifying your content, whether it's with Wisdom's Tableau extension or some other, method. Can you let your users know in some way that the content can be trusted and has followed these steps of kind of testing and deployment before the certification? And also, are you using certified data sources? That's something to think about too. Tableau has some really good capabilities around data source certification. If you're not using that, if that topic isn't familiar to you, I would definitely recommend taking a look at, there's a wealth of information out there on the web and on Tableau's documentation around data source certification. If you're having problems with trust, in dashboards and managing, hundreds, if not thousands of dashboards out there, these are topics I would just all encourage you to think about, especially as we're going into a new year. What better time to kind of get the house in order around these things? And then, of course, we can visualize test results in Tableau too. So whether you're using Wisdom or some other method, your own method, think about how you could visualize these in Tableau. For Wisdom Ops for Tableau, we have a Postgres integration where we can capture testing results in Postgres and then connect them to a dashboard like what I've made available on Tableau Public. This is actually out there on Wisdom's Tableau Public page. I built this dashboard. I just updated it with our latest release of Wisdom, which was 2023.4. So this is updated for Q4. And this dashboard is just kind of a simple example of, like, if you were to read, those test results that are coming out of your testing tool, like what are the kinds of things that you might want to look at on a regular basis? Maybe this is a dashboard that you open every morning when you start work. You take a look at, okay, were there test failures yesterday or over the last few days? With my dashboard here, you can click on test failures. Gray represents a failure. Green represents a test that passed. I click on a green one that happened a couple days ago. I can see here now, this was my dashboard view, my tooltip that produced a failure. Here I can click on it and inspect it right here. But the issue that happened was it was something with a filter. So very quickly, by running these automated tests, scheduling these automated tests, collecting the data in Postgres, connecting it to my dashboard here, I can quickly see when a failure occurred, where it occurred, what dashboard, and then also what the issue was. And then click right in and inspect that dashboard, fix it before my user or executive calls, says that message like the finance manager did in my earlier slide. Hey, I've got a meeting in 30 minutes and this filter isn't working. Well, I knew about it 4 days earlier before I got that call because I had this ecosystem in place. All right, cool. Yes, Jen, you do spy some parts to whole charts. All right. I said I would plan for 25 minutes. It is 12 o'clock noon in Central Time on the head. My closing comment here is, think about this as the year ends, right? And you're going off to your Christmas parties and New Year's Eve parties. I would hate for anyone to have to be anxious about what their dashboards are going to look like on January 1st. And I think there is really a better way than just worrying about it, going into the office, spending 3 days checking dashboards, getting filters in order, things like that. Like, we don't want to be doing that. We want to be celebrating. We want to be having fun with our friends and family. And so what a good time to think about as the end of year approaches, how you can test your content and reduce all the manual work around it. All right. I think there might have been a couple questions. I see Derek said it sounds like I deal with government data. I actually do not, but that's funny. Rob says performance is always a concern. Snappy reports make happy customers. Absolutely agree. And we do performance testing as well, but also capturing those durations that it takes to run the tests on certain functional tests is very helpful. And you can actually trend the time durations over time too for certain tests that you run, which is pretty cool. Some of our customers like that capability. Raki says definitely test in UAT would be my choice. Yeah, as it may have some better data sets in dev environment before putting in prod. Totally agree. Okay, cool. Actually didn't see any specific questions in the chat. So I left the last 4 minutes here, I guess, to answer anything I saw in the chat. But if verbally you want to come off of mute and ask anything, I'd be glad to hang around for a few minutes. Otherwise, we can move to the next section.
Hey,
the last
thing.
thing.
Hello. I think you did overlook one question in the chat from Rakshi as well. Would you have versioning so that if a certain feature didn't work, you could fall back on an earlier tested one?
Would you have versioning so that if a certain feature did not work, we could fall back on an earlier tested one? Okay, so Wisdom is we don't do version control in Wisdom. That's a great point. One thing to consider there is I don't know if you're using like a tool like Jenkins, for managing a CI/CD pipeline or something like that. Possible that you could manage something like that using steps in a tool like that. We do, integrate very easily with CI/CD pipeline tools like Jenkins. Anything really that leverages CLI, we could manage. You can manage a lot of things there. So there's some ways we could get at that, which I'd be glad to talk with you about. But in terms of actually managing version control for dashboards, no, that's not something that we do in ops for Tableau.
Well, great, and thank you, Dustin. Great presentation. A lot of things to think about. A lot of great information there as we move forward into the first of the year and the rest of the year where it really applies. I think we
totally agree. And Rob, can I just say one last thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I promised Jen. She said, "Hey, could you mention this at the end?" So I want to fulfill. I just remembered I have to fulfill my promise. But I mentioned at the beginning, I do co-host the Data Career Summit with Brandy Beals, who's also a Tableau ambassador. Yes, Jen, thank you for the thumbs up. I did remember. We do have the next Data Career Summit coming up on February 23rd. It is you'll see if you go onto our website, datacareersummit.com, and you click to register, there is a registration fee on there, but also you'll notice that there's an option to register for free. If the registration fee is an issue for anyone, we don't want that to be a barrier to attend. So do know that there's a $0 option to register as well. So I just wanted to put that forward. We never want cost to be a barrier for this. And if you have any questions about the summit, check out the website, look at our recordings on our YouTube page, and also reach out to Brandy or myself. We'd be glad to answer any questions about it. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the time.
Great. Thank you. And I think you have to quit sharing before you did. So we're great. Then I can try to share. Maybe get this back. I'm gonna hide that guy. And now we're going to continue our series on choosing charts. This time looking at part to whole. How do we spread measures out over dimensions? A lot of chart samples on the right of your screen at this time. We're going to look at a couple of those. I'm going to demo building a couple different ones of those, a couple that aren't there. And there's lots of great information. So if you go out to the chart chooser on Tableau Public, you'll find a whole lot more stuff. Jen is going to follow up some great examples that are out there in the wild and show us what is available, what can be done. So I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint here. I'm starting with a new blank workbook using Superstore as a data source because it's available to everyone. I'm going to just start and create a pie chart. So if I change my marks card and tell I really want a pie chart, maybe I want to see my sales by city. So I'm going to put color on city, and I'm going to take sales. I'm going to drop that onto size. And now I have this. All right, it's dragging in a couple other things I didn't want. Thank you, Tableau. I'm going to make this larger so we can see the entire view. Add a label in here for my sales, and I see the most wonderful, awful pie chart that we should never create. Part of the reason why, in general, I don't like pie charts, but pie charts do have a place. So what if we wanted to do a pie chart that had a fewer segments? Maybe we'd like to see things by product category. Now we've got product category, we only see 3 segments, and this is something we can really get a handle on. It's going to tell us that across products, our sales are pretty even. They're about a third in each place, and we could add more labels and details onto this pretty easily. But there is a place for pie charts. My suggestion would be 2 or at most 3 segments on any pie chart. One other way we can start to look at parts of the whole is just a very simple bar chart. Say we had a few more items to look at. Maybe we want to see all our sales by subcategory. We've got a handful of subcategories. We grab our sales numbers. We see a bar chart. One of the first things that I always do whenever I create a chart in Tableau is come in and remove some of these grid lines that are in the background just because they're extra clutter, give myself more white space. And while this starts to tell a story, we can make it a little bit better just by sorting the order of these bars. And I'm going to make them descending, and I'm going to tell it to use a field. In this case, Tableau said, well, what about using sales? Because that's already on my canvas. So it's going to tell me that, vast majority of my sales dollars come from chairs and phones and storage, not so much from fasteners, which pretty much makes sense. The next question I have as I start to look at this and say, well, what group of products make up half my sales? And this might make more sense if you're looking at something, say, instead of different types of office supplies, we were a peanut butter factory and we had natural peanut butter and creamy and chunky. Where do I have to draw the line to get half my sales or 3/4 of the sales? So as we're starting to do that, there's a chart that's very popular in the Six Sigma world called a Pareto. So what we're going to do is take this chart that we already have. I'm going to hold down Control. If you have an Apple product, you hold down the little Apple key. drag the pill over here and make a copy of it. And I'm going to tell it the second pill. Oops, I want to do that on the marks card here. The second marks card created here, I want to say, make this a line. So now I have a line that looks very much like my bars. If I put these both on the same axis just by choosing dual axis, Tableau tries to help me and tell me my first marks should be circles. I really wanted those to be bars. I really haven't added anything here. I have a line that matches the top of my bars, but I can make a really simple table calculation here to show me a running total. And now I get a line that's my running total. And maybe I'll make that a different color just so it stands out a little bit. To me, it would be even more intuitive than really the spirit of the Pareto. If I took this and changed my table calculation, I can edit that to show running total as a percent of the total. So if I then add a secondary calculation, which is percent of total, and I'm going to take that and drop that onto label, drop a copy onto label, and we can see that I'm getting here in this 38, 48% with the first 4 bars, 56 with 5. So these first 4 or 5 products make up about half of all my sales. And by the time I add in labels and fasteners, which I might sell a lot of those, but they don't bring in a lot of sales dollars. Profit might be something completely different. One of the extensions to a Pareto chart that we like to do a lot of times, and I'll just duplicate this to do it. And one thing I should notice is we'll be sharing this workbook, actually with table names down at the bottom, because I ran through a practice and did this earlier. But I might want to look not just at category, but how about subcategory within category? And simply adding this up here to columns, and Tableau does a great job of splitting out my furniture, office supplies, and technology. One thing you'll notice is that I still have the same orange line, which is really the one from before. It's not behaving quite like I'd like it to. And to make it behave the way I want to, I need to really edit the table calculation and come in here. And within the table calculation, I'm going to tell it to restart at every category. And that gets a little bit closer. We now have our lines that are growing, but they're still not quite where they need to be. And the reason is that it's still looking at that percent of total over all of the data and not just the subcategory. So I want to calculate that just within subcategory. And now I have exactly what we'd expect running from 14% up to 100%, somewhere around 30 to 100, 78 to 100, except I'm telling you this is 100% and it says 34 and 63. And the reason is that I've only edited the table calculation on this one pill, not on my label. So I need to recopy this down to label or come in and edit this. And now I'm seeing results that are more consistent with what I would expect. Another nice type of chart that we talk about in Excel is a tree map. And I don't use tree maps as much as I should, which is my downfall, but they are a valuable chart and a great way to look at things. And say I wanted to look at sales again, and I'll just grab sales and I'll put sales onto color. And I want to look at category and subcategory. I'm going to drag those both onto text just so I get some text out here for category and subcategory. And then if I take a copy of sales and put that on size, Tableau is going to tell me, well, this should be automatic, and automatic in this case means a square. So I'm going to click on square just for clarity. One thing to notice that, for those of you who are math majors in college, a square doesn't have sides that are all the same size in Tableau. Squares are really rectangles, but it does what we want it to do. And I'm going to drop a label on there too. One thing that you'll notice at this point as I duplicate the worksheet is that while Tableau's done a great job of sorting out technology, office supplies, and furniture, put some nice white space between things, there's probably a better way to differentiate these so I can look at them really quickly and see them grouped. And without having to repeat the word technology in every square, take out some of that clutter, add a little bit more to it, some other way to differentiate, and color is a great way to do that. So, my first thought would be, I'll grab category because there I've got technology, office supplies, and furniture, and just drop category on color. And it kind of works, but it replaces what was already in my colors marks card. I said, well, I've seen this before. The real solution is to, instead of dropping it, is come over here to the slide and select color. Then I can have 2 items in my marks card. And Tableau, being really helpful, says, you can't do that. And the reason I can't do that is I'm trying to grab one categorical variable and one continuous variable, and I can't use both on color at the same time. So the real solution, and the only calculated column I've added here, is to create another calculated column. And what I've done is I've created a string out of the sum of sales. And because it's a string, it is a dimension. Strings are not numeric. So I can take my category and drop my category up here into color. Any of the three ways that I just did it would work. I can then take my sum of sales here and change it from text to a color. And that did not do what I wanted to do. Oh, what I want to do is add in the new one I created. I'll add it to detail. And then I've got my color for sales here that I can change to color. Tableau now has 2 pills on the color marks card. So I'm seeing, over here in green, I have technology, I have some orange office supplies and some blue furniture, which really starts to move me in the direction I want to go. From here, you can continue to customize. We've got 6 minutes left to look at just a couple other things. Again, bar charts are really great, and we can do a lot with bar charts. They're simple, they're easy to understand at a glance. So I'm going to grab sales again because we keep focusing on sales here. And I'm just going to take my order date, which is here. If I use the right mouse button to bring it in, I get a choice, and I'm going to choose that I just want to see the year, and I want to see category, which is here. And so Tableau is giving me a bar chart. One of the things I say, well, maybe I can clean this up a little bit and take category and also put that on color. So drag a copy of category over to color, and I get something that, really glares out at me. The colors are too bright. You can do things and come in here and change the opacity to make it not glare. While this does give us the information that we need, it's really hard to try to follow and see, what's the relationship among these three, and how does, whether it's red, green, orange, move over time. So there's probably an easier way to do this or a better way to do this. And one of the things that I like to do is start to look at this and say, well, what would happen if I took category, left it on color, but I did not put it up here on column? So I didn't create a separate column for each category. And as soon as I do that, Tableau says, I'm moving over time. This should really be a line. I'm going to change it back to a bar. And I'm going to make it horizontal and make it just a little bit bigger here. So it's easier to see, and put my sales numbers on the label just so we can see them. And with just a few clicks, we're able to see that, yeah, I've got sales that are growing in different categories. The question is, next question I come up with was, what happens if I want to look at this a little differently? Maybe I want to see, what is the market share? Maybe this is natural peanut butter, creamy and chunky peanut butter. As I do that, I can duplicate the slide, and I get a really quick table calculation here. I can look at percentage of total. Which did not give me what I wanted to, so we'll edit the table calculation to find out. Percent of total, and I really need to look at percent of total just for the category. And you'll notice that the labels stayed the same, so I'll drag this other label down there. Edit in labels. I can now see that, yeah, we're about a third, and a third. But one of the things that we've seen is that, we're shrinking here and growing here. So maybe if I put these two on a dashboard, one of the things to remember is anytime you start to work with percentages, it's very good to look not just at percentages, but also at the absolute numbers. I'm going to do this, so we could create a filter and share a filter across these two worksheets. We'll just do a really quick and dirty way here of just looking at 2 years. If I were to present this to an executive and say, yeah, here's where our sales are doing, here's our product categories. We've got our natural peanut butter and our creamy and chunky. We're going to say, from 2020 to 2023, we've really started to see this creamy peanut butter cannibalizing the chunky market. We're gaining market share here. We're losing market share there. And that's the problem with looking at only a percentage. And when we look at both the percentage and the numbers, we see the truth. The whole picture is that both of these categories, creamy and chunky, have grown. So it isn't one cannibalizing the other. We've grown market share, if we like to call it that, within our peanut butter market with one compared to the other. So as you start to look at parts of the whole, sometimes you need to look at things with two different charts side by side to really tell the whole story. let's see how we're doing here. We still have 2 minutes left, so we're in a great place here. And I'll hand things over just a couple minutes early to Jen. And if we have time at the end, if you have questions, we can answer those. Otherwise, we'll go on to our next topics.
Fabulous. Thanks, Rob. You said you weren't going to do speed tipping, but I'm impressed at how many different tips you were able to get through just in that amount of time. Hopefully you all learned a few things. I know some of us have been commenting in the chat about our appreciation for for different perspectives there. So what I'm going to be sharing then are some of the examples that I found on Tableau Public of people who have used parts to whole charts that I thought were, in most cases, really well done, or at least certainly thought-provoking. So I've got several examples here of different types to parts to whole. I'm not going to have time to go super in depth in each of these, but I would love to see reactions to these in the chat. If you see something that you really like, or something that inspires you, or maybe something that you think could be done a little bit better, feel free to go ahead and comment on that. And to remember that we're choosing 2 of our prize winners today from engagement in this meeting. So giving you an easy way to engage. So let's get to some of these examples. So first, I'm going to actually start with a stacked bar chart as well. So I found this viz several years ago, and I was immediately captured by it. It's such a simple concept. It's stacked bars, but it's basically just aligned 2 different stacks side by side, and then over time. So I'll actually show you the full version here in Tableau Public so we can appreciate it in all its glory. And what we're looking at here, a portion of the U.S. House of Representatives who are men versus women by the 2 primary parties, Democrats versus Republicans. And I love how this viz evokes this idea, at least to me, of this kind of curtain opening. So the older Congresses are towards the top, more recent. This is a few years old now. This is from 2017-19 is the most recent year on here. More recent years at the bottom. And you can kind of see the female proportions kind of chipping away at the male proportions. And so, as I said, it kind of looks like this curtain opening. Again, I think this is incredibly effective. Just a couple simple bars, 2 groups in each, male and female. But you can see, because of that use of color and the way it's arranged and just the way the data tell this shape really nicely, to see that story reveal itself. So this is one of my favorite examples of an effective use of a stacked bar chart. It does have a lot of ink. So I guess if you were being a purist about the ink to data ratio, it does use up a lot of that. But I also think, yeah, it's great, Nancy. I'd like to see an update too. I also think it does tell a nice story. Okay, so we'll share this deck with you all afterwards. So if you want to go take a look at some of this great, you certainly can. My next example, so we saw an example of this kind of small multiples or panel chart or trellis chart that Dustin had on his dashboard of these donut charts. Could have been a pie chart too. In this case, it's just in donut format. So what I like about these is that you can actually convey quite a bit of information. Sorry, my link to work here. You convey quite a bit of information in a relatively compact space. So here we're looking at attrition. This is from the Real World Fake Data Project, one of my favorites as a person who builds primarily business dashboards. And they're looking at the attrition in the green versus the people who stayed with the company in the darker gray. And so in this space, you can see the counts of each of these. So in this case, here we're looking at males, the men who stayed, the males who and then you also get a sense from that donut chart of the proportion. Now, if I were designing them, giving this person feedback, I do think it would be helpful to actually name that percentage in the middle. There is this space in the donut chart, since it's not the pie, where you could put that piece of information. I think that would make this even better. But I do like how you can get the count and that sense of percentage from within one little chart. And then here, the data are pretty similar, so it doesn't stand out a lot. But you can imagine maybe a different data source where these proportions might be more different from each other. And I think that little wedge of green really catches your attention, and you can notice, even though you don't know exactly what that proportion is, at least to me, this tiny wedge stands out compared to this bigger wedge. But then you also see from those counts that there are more employees in this group. So there's a lot of hate for pie charts out there. I think they can be really effective, pie or donut, when you have something like this where it's not a lot of wedges, there's not a lot of excess formatting on here. Certainly don't want 3D exploding versions, but I think they can be really effective when you're comparing just group A versus group B. Looks like little dials. Yeah, they kind of do, right? Little dials on there. Okay, let's check our next example here. So here is also a form of a donut chart. This one does have more segments than just the two, but I was kind of captivated by this because I thought it was a really unique way to show this information. So this is a form of a map. Look at Europe, European countries specifically, and more or less positioned how they are in the world, geographically speaking. And then what Neil has done is he has encoded what these countries border. And that's the part that's the outer donut. So for example, Iceland up here is an island. The only thing it's bordered by is water. So the color legend, where's my color legend? Oh, I thought he had a color legend. Well, maybe that would be a good thing to add, right? What do the color legends mean? He did color code the sea. Otherwise, you have to hover over each of these to see its borders. But what I liked about this is that you get a sense really quickly, even though it's a little hard to tell what that proportion is. You can see, for example, a country like Poland is bordered by a lot of different countries, and Germany is bordered by even more. And then you've got some of these down here that are bordered by even more. And so without necessarily needing to know the precise amount, because I don't think that's the point here, it's really more about which of these countries touch a lot of other ones, or which ones touch a good chunk of them touch the sea, and which of them are completely internal. I think you can get that sense from this chart type without needing those specifics. And the proportional size by country. Yeah, good point, Paula, that you also get that sense too, because they're sized. And yeah, hovering over shows other parts of the dashboard. So if we hover over this section of Finland here, you can see that this is referencing Russia, which is not pictured, Sweden, and so on. Oh, you're suggesting a highlight action. Yeah, that might have been helpful too, to show if I'm hovering over Sweden, what all countries touch it. That's a great addition. So yeah, it's a little bit busier than some donuts or pies might normally be. But I think it could work in a case like this, where it's not about the exact sizing. We don't really need people to know what portion of Poland's border is touching Russia. You just get the sense that it's a little bit of it. And as someone who's very geographically challenged, I find this extra helpful because I can never remember which countries touch other ones. All right, my next example for you is a tree map. I love tree maps. I use them not a lot, but I do use them in my work. And I thought this was a really great example where you get that overall sense of the data for the tree map. And I want to make sure I show you the whole viz because there's actually a lot more to this. So each countries within these different regions of the world are rated for their press and how much freedom their press has. And so the scale is here at the top. So the green colors are good, satisfactory, then we've got kind of problematic, and then difficult, and then the darker red is very serious. And there's the tree maps that give you that oversense at the regional level as each rectangle within the tree map representing an individual country. And then there's this more detailed view down below where you can see each country over time. So this is a time scale from left to right in this region. And then, gosh, I loved this. So if you look at any one country, you can see its history, and you can't see it very well on your screen, but there's also a timeline that shows up connecting the countries to each other. So loved this viz in general, but I especially want to talk about this tree map part because I think it's clear at a quick glance which of these regions have plenty of green, which ones are sitting more in the red, and which ones are sitting really in the red. And it looks to me like they're ordered in that way as well. So I thought this was a great use of a tree map, in particular because there aren't a lot of categories. There's no more than, it looks like 5 in any one region. So that's helpful. You don't have too many segments. And they're all somewhat reasonably sized. You can get to them with your mouse. So sometimes it's hard when a tree map has teeny, tiny segments. It does make it really hard to even see those. In this case, even the smallest segment is noticeable and easy to get your mouse to get those details. So I thought this was a good example of a tree map. Sorry, trying to keep up on the chat while I go through these as well. All right, let's see here. Next example. Oh, another one of my all-time favorites. I favorited this viz on Tableau Public years and years ago, and I keep using it anytime I'm talking about parts to whole or stacked bar charts or even just data viz because I love it. And not just because I do enjoy an alcoholic beverage, although to be honest, that's probably what drew me to it to begin with. But I think this was such a great use of small multiples, which you'll see here in a moment, and a great use of stacked area charts to tell this story. So what we're looking at here, each square is a country, And we're looking at these trends over time of the alcohol, the types of alcohol consumption in that country. And this is built so that it always totals to 100%. So in any given year, we know the totality of the beverages consumed, and then it's just broken down proportionally for these 4 different beverage types. And so even without with your mouse at all to get any of the particular values, you do get a general sense of how the beverage trends have changed or not in a particular country. So Austria is a great example where it's pretty steady. They generally prefer beer, although wine's good too, and that has stayed stable for decades. Whereas you have other countries where those proportions have changed quite a bit. So Australia, wine increasing over time, and then you see somewhere here in the early 2000s, the other, should add in Wisconsin. Yeah, I would like to see this by US state as well. I think if we could get our hands on their data, that would be a great way to show that. So some countries do have this other category. I'm assuming that means things like hard cider, seltzers, et cetera, and other countries don't. But if you scroll down, there's country after country, and oh my gosh, these patterns are fascinating, and I love the color scheme. I just love everything about this biz. And I think it's such a great way where you can hover over to get the tooltip and see what that exact percentage is if you really cared. But I don't think that's the main point here. It's more about this overall trend, this overall pattern, and the fact that some countries drink a lot of a particular type of beverage and other countries drink almost none of it. So I loved this example of a stacked area chart part to whole. I'm enjoying your comments too. I'm glad some of you are engaging with us. Keep that up. I'll try to respond to those. France and Italy. Yeah, some countries really love their wine. This is no surprise if they are big producers of wine, right? All right, another area chart. Now this one is a bit different in that it's not proportional in terms of summing to 100, but it is still stacking so that you see the relative contribution. In this case, we're looking at natural disasters. And this is also a much more involved viz than just that little piece I showed you. I would encourage you check this work out. There's so much going on in this visualization, and I thought it was just beautiful. So there's a map at the top that shows where all these different disasters are happening. Some countries, a lot of different colors because they have a lot of different disasters. There's a nice example of help overlays here. But the part we're looking at here is this area chart down at the bottom. So although area charts in general do make it difficult to know what that exact proportion is, it does give you that sense overall. It's probably really clear to everybody looking at this, even if you can't read the legend and aren't sure which disaster is which, whatever this blue color is, that's the most, right? You can see that very clearly. It happens to be floods. So there have been a lot of floods, especially more recently. This color you can tell is the next highest, even without knowing exactly what that number is. And then if you hover over, you can get those exacts. The other really interesting thing here is how much this has increased. I have to put on my data analyst hat and say that I wonder if it's more just about data availability, that perhaps there were more natural disasters back in the 60s and 70s, but we just didn't maybe have as many weather stations or whatever the various recording mechanism might be. So it could just be a data availability issue. But we do know that the intensity of storms is increasing and frequency of storms is increasing. So that could be part of the story too. So I really liked this one. It does have more categories than maybe would be ideal in an area chart if you want people to be able to see each of them. But you certainly get that sense of which are the biggest contributors. And it's also helpful to know that some of these disasters, while impactful and costly, are not a big part of the overall total of the disasters that are happening globally. So sometimes that is an important message, that it is a tiny part of the whole. We have a couple more minutes here and a couple more examples. So this one, I think of it mostly as a waffle chart because this is proportioned to 100%. So Chimdi did great work. You've probably come across him as part of the analytics tug and just has had several viz of the days. And I really thought this was neat. This is a recent viz of the day. So, or I should say, I think they reduxed it. It was previously viz of the day and they made it viz of the day again, something like that. Anyway, here we're looking at US data and we're looking at the racial and ethnic makeup within a state. And then each state is the little square and it's more or less positioned how it would be in the country, which is a really cool effect. And each dot within that square is representing about 1% of people, so that you get that 100%, the whole, and then you can see, proportionally speaking, which states are more diverse than others. And so even without being able to see this probably very clearly on your tiny screens, you get a sense, for example, that New Mexico has a lot more dots that are not just the dark gray background color compared to some of the other states. So I really thought this was a cool way to show a lot of information in a relatively compact space. And I think it's really helpful because the states do have different populations, and that's not the point here. Yes, we know there are way more people in New York and Florida and California, but what we want to know is, proportionally speaking, how racially diverse is each state. And so that's where these parts to whole really come into play, is they kind of standardize all of the states on the same scale, the 0 to 100, and then we can see that representation within each of them. So I thought this was a good example too. This one, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go out to the full dashboard. It is also something that is worth taking a look at, because they talk about the plight of the cheetah and how the population has decreased so much over time, and some of the threats against cheetahs. And as a person who is a conservationist and an environmentalist and animal lover, this made me very sad. But I also was really intrigued by this use of a plum pudding chart. So normally I just see one of these where it's showing a proportion of something, kind of like a waffle chart where you've got the 100% idea and then you're showing the proportions of something within it. But in this case, what they did is they put two side by side so they could really show the difference between the population, the whole, what it all used to be, and then the relative decline in the number of cheetahs in the wild. And then they put the big number here too to actually define that for you. But I think the spots looking like a cheetah is really creative, but I also think it was just a great use of having this chart type with having these side by side, so that you can see how few dots are colored in over here versus what it used to be. Even if you don't need the exact numbers here to get that sense that it's changed and declined dramatically. So I thought that was a really cool use of this type of viz. I've seen other people use plum pudding charts to show parts to hold information, like there is one Kinley Scott did on the components of breast milk, for example. So it gives you the sense of what are the pieces that make up this total, as all the parts to hold charts do, right? All right, just one more here. So this one is a Voronoi chart, and I thought this was super fascinating. So looking over all of the centuries, so each of the little charts, small multiple, is a century, showing the different types of people who are notable for that time period. And it also just looks like art, it looks like stained glass, which is really pretty. But then you can see in older centuries, like this one, there's a lot of different groups in that kind of share the space. But oh my gosh, look what has happened in the more recent past with this tremendous rise in sports players as notable figures. That was not the case in previous centuries. And although this isn't a great chart, again, for the precision, I do think it's a good chart. At least certainly gets your attention and definitely gives you the sense of the relative contribution of some of these groups. Yeah, you can't really tell what this tiny yellow group is over here unless you hover over it, but you certainly know who the big players are, at least in terms of the categories. I thought that was really interesting and incredible that they had all of these centuries worth of data in here. So another one I would certainly recommend taking a look at. So I will share this slide deck. Hopefully some of this was inspirational to you, or maybe gave you some thoughts about a different type of part to hold than just your standard stacked bar. I love a good stacked bar too, but there are lots of different viz types that you can use. And there's so much great work out there. I'm always impressed with this community and all the amazing work that people do and all the great examples they have of how to look at data. All right, Robert, over to you.
Thanks, Jen. That was super interesting. All right, we're going to try to do the infinite screen here for minimum time. All right. So my name is Robert Salas, also part of the Madison Tableau user group leadership team. I am a freelance consultant for the last 12 years with a primary state client and a few other irons in the fire. And I also teach a course at a college recently for data visualization. What I'm going to talk about today is creating custom navigation buttons. And I hope I'll be done in time. If I'm talking too fast, I'll try and catch myself, but maybe Jen will caution me if I start going 100 miles an hour, as I do sometimes. Custom navigation buttons, what are they, right? We have all seen the old tried and true, boring tabs that go across the top of most Tableau dashboards. And as I'm sure is true with most of us, we often create more than one dashboard tab. And I'm going to continue to use the word tabs, even though I'm not going to use them throughout this presentation. But that's how we think of them, I think, generally. So in this case, I've got a screenshot from Superstore. There's 6 tabs, 6 individual dashboards, and navigating them across the top, of course, works. But some people overlook them. They do eat up a little tiny bit of the vertical space, and they're just so boring. So you can give your users a more interesting way to navigate between these different dashboards that's both visually more interesting and also sometimes more intuitive. 2 major approaches. There's a lot of different ways, but 2 major approaches are to create a navigation stack, which can be a stack of buttons or a stack of icons, or having navigation icons that are kind of free floating and arranged any which way you want them to be. So I'm going to talk about both, although I'm going to focus most of my time and working through this on the stack of buttons. But what I'm going to do here is go through the whole presentation and then go through the steps of it. I thought about this between flipping back and forth between the PowerPoint, and I thought it'd be too disruptive and confusing perhaps. So I'm going to go through my whole presentation here up until the end, and then circle back and walk through how you actually build these. It's really straightforward. It's just somewhat onerous. It's a very repetitive, task-oriented process, but it's not hard. So first off, here are a couple of resources where you can get some of the graphics and sort of utility pieces that I'm using in here. The first one I'm going to start with is something that the Fleur-Lage twins put up several years ago, which is a template for creating dashboard buttons. These are really great. There's a lot of options and different ways of selecting them as a button that looks like a check mark or a push button or just an oval. In the middle is the Noun Project, which is a fantastic resource for icons. You can find just about anything you're looking for, and there's about 5 million different icons in there. And search for just about anything. Download them in different forms, sizes, colors, etc. And then finally on the right is Shutterstock, where you can find images for just about everything if you wanted to use pictures rather than graphic icons. So just a couple of options there. I am going to show you the Fleur-Lage twins template throughout this process. If you go to that website, their website, and open up the link, you'll wind up at a Tableau dashboard that Kevin Fleur-Lage put together, which shows the different and various options and buttons that are there. And up in the top left corner, you'll see another button that says Download Buttons Template. And that will actually send you then to a Google Drive document that is shared, which is a PowerPoint. You can then save that PowerPoint file locally, which is what I'd recommend. And then that allows you to modify the buttons and the text that's in them very, very easily. This is my process, right? So I've downloaded the PowerPoint and I like these sort of plain ovals that have a little tiny bit of shadow to give it a little bit of depth. So then I have a PowerPoint slide where I just copy paste the template form of these buttons and modify the text for each one. For my own ease, because I hate flipping back and forth between things, I often will take a screenshot from Tableau Desktop or from the server, showing all the tabs that I want to create and have buttons to navigate to. And I just plop it right in there so I can see it immediately that I have to do overview, product, customers, shipping, commission model, order details down there at the bottom with the red arrow. You do need to create sets. So you can see on here, I have a pair for overview. I have a pair for product. I have a pair for customers. And the reason for that is you need one that shows both what you've pressed and where you are and what you're looking at. So sort of navigationally and intuitively, people know where they are. And also the unpressed buttons for where they could go. So you wind up with a bunch of pairs. And here I've shown just screenshots of the files saved off with the pairs that I created for this demo. And you also see them visually as you would in Windows Explorer. Now, just a note, and this is something relatively new to me with a recent Windows upgrade, is that when you have transparent objects, they look like they have a black background, which kind of throws me for a loop. Between my different computers. So in this one, the black background is to indicate that they have a transparent background, which is great because when you put them into your dashboard, they don't obscure any of the lines or graphics or color that's beneath it. So you definitely want to go with PNGs there. Alternatively, you can compile icons. And again, I'm showing here the Noun Project website where you just search for a term. And you can see up in the search bar on the left, I just typed in the word overview and it gave me, I don't know, 469 icons that it seems to think represent overview. Scroll through, pick what you like. And on the bottom right is where you actually have selected an icon and you can modify what it looks like. You can change the icon color. You can give it an outline that's a square, rounded square, or a circle, a background color, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, I just wanted the icon in a transparent form, and then you can download it as a PNG or an SVG. You do have to be a member of Noun Project. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest bargains on the planet. It's $20 per year to download any and all graphics, icons, unlimited amounts that you might need for your own development work. So I find it to be a bargain, and I highly recommend it. Moving on then, we're going to be in Tableau Desktop in a few minutes how to do this, but basically you're going to add a vertical container into your dashboard. I typically like the left side. Some people like the right side. Just depends on your personal preference and your design. I like somewhere between 150 or 175 pixels wide. The reason for that is I know that I will also be adding filters typically below the navigation. Since I'm already reserving this space, I don't want to waste it. So if I'm going to have a navigation stack, that's also where I'm going to put all the filters. I arranged some spacer or blank objects to give myself some white space, so to speak, above and below. And then start adding in the navigation objects, as many as you need. And again, in this case, for this example, I needed 6. For fun, I've got the word navigation and filter there with a space between each letter. So that's not a fancy font, that's just spaced out to make it look a little bit differently. And then as far as the lines go, that's a trick I learned from one of the Fleur-Lage twins just a few months ago of making a very small text, blank box and then giving it a background color. It's a 10 pixel tall blank box. Anyway, this is what it'll look like when you initially start. You have these buttons that just say navigation, and they are the navigation object you drag up from the objects area of Tableau Desktop. I do tend to put a little bit of light background behind the vertical container just to give it a little bit more depth on the screen and also to sort of demarcate there's something different over here and it's visually reserved. As I add the navigation objects, I give them all a manually set size of 50 or 60 pixels, depending on the overall size of the dashboard. And then you click on each one and go to Edit Button, as you can see in the top right. This gives you the option of entering a name, not a name, the dashboard tab that you want it to go to. So in this case, I've selected Go to the Overview tab. To make it an image-based navigation button, and then you go choose the image that you want. And you can also set a tooltip in there. So when people hover over it, it will pop up a little message. By default, it says navigate to whatever you told us to navigate to. I tend to change them so that they say click to see the product's dashboard, or if it's the one that they're actually on where it will show the button as being depressed. I usually have it say, this is your current dashboard view so that they know, oh, this is the one I'm looking at. It's not going to take me anywhere else. You can also configure icons instead of buttons, right? So it's exactly the same, but I tend to make it a narrower stack, about 100 pixels. And then I manually size the icons, which are typically square, to be about 80 pixels tall. That way they have some reserved white space on both sides. When you edit the button, you'll do the same thing, searching out an image file. And in this case, you definitely should put in a tooltip because the icon itself gives no context about what you're going to. So if you were going to click on this truck, it would be important to know that you're going to click on that to go see the shipping dashboard, right? And then at the bottom, I have what I've sometimes put together as freestanding icons where they are not a stack, they're more of a row. This sort of greenish gray circle around them is the cohesive visual that, hey, this is a button you're going to click. And the one that's been pressed is the one that's in gray, sort of as a photo negative effect of what's been pressed. And here's the end result, right? So on the left, you see the navigation stack for dashboard, the overview dashboard. When you click on product, it'll take you to the one on the right and then show as having the product button selected. So I'm going to go through this process and we will come back to this. Okay, so here I am in Tableau Desktop. I've already taken the time to put in the vertical container and make the width what I wanted it to be. We don't need to waste time on that. In fact, I only have a few minutes left. So I've added the navigation buttons that I need. Again, you would click on each one and go to Edit Button. In doing so, I'm then going to go search for the image that I want. In this case, I want my Overview pressed button because this is the tab that I'm actually on. Click Open. I can enter the text I want. Click OK. And now I have a button there and it looks like it's pressed. Now I'm going to select the other ones that I'm not looking at. And I'm going to do these quickly because we're almost out of time. So the next dashboard that I need to pick down the row is product. Going to skip the tooltip there and so on and so forth. So again, this is not a difficult process or even a very time-consuming process. It just is methodical, and the better organized you are, the faster it'll go. So I would go down the line and choose all of the buttons that I've already pre-configured. How did I pre-configure those, Robert? I skipped that part. Well, in the PowerPoint slide I showed you earlier, I've got these, the template, and I cannot see my mouse cursor for some reason. There we go. I've taken the one slide from Kevin Flaherlage's template and saved it off and then brought into it just these objects that I wanted. I set the oval border to be the color and thickness that I wanted. I put in a color fill that I wanted for this, and then I just copy paste. So to make another pair, I'm just going to highlight those and create another pair, go in and call this commission model, right? Easy peasy. Go in here, try and spell it right. And then in PowerPoint, one really nice thing is that if you highlight an image or something that you've built using shapes, you can go to save as picture. It will automatically save it as a transparent object. And then I just save these one by one, and I wind up with a folder full of text buttons. Here they all are. So going back to Tableau Desktop, that's what I'm going and choosing when I do that. When I'm complete, I would have a full stack of buttons that look like this. I bring my filters and make them nicely arranged and configure those so that my left side navigation and filter pane is pretty much ready to go. In using it, you just click on the button and it will navigate you to the other dashboard tab. Because I've landed on the product dashboard, now the product button appears with the pressed version of the graphic. If I go back to overview, you can see it toggles back and forth between those. The icon stack is very similar. I've already pre-built this in the interest of time. Again, the one that is grayed out, sort of the negative aspect of the icon, is the one that's pressed. To go to products, I would click that, and did not build all of these out. But that's what an icon stack looks at. To be honest, I prefer the text buttons because it's clearer what they are, and it also sort of fits in better with sort of web page functionality in view. That's it. That's building custom icons for navigation. Any questions?
Yeah, there were a few in the chat. If maybe you want to tackle them there, Robert,
Sure.
so we can start up our poll. I will just say, since you're making. What? Okay.
I almost stopped the recording.
Yeah, don't do that. I was going to say, if you're making custom buttons in PowerPoint and you wanted to use icons and text, you could do it that way.
Absolutely.
All right. Next, we want to hear from you all. So we are just going to do a brief poll, and the screen showing there. So you're going to go to kahoot.it and put in that pin, and then we will get started here in just a moment. Oh, there we go. Coming in fast and furious. It's like, I hope we have more than 2 people participating. Excellent. So Rob mentioned at the beginning of this meeting that we are having our holiday party. You all saw that in the invite for this meeting as well. Even though we're doing this meeting virtually to kind of see how it goes, we also want the opportunity to get together with you all and celebrate the end of a successful year, have some food, some drinks, have a good time. So we want to hear a little bit more from you on where we should have that party. So that'll be one of our questions. All right, I'm going to kick off this poll. If you want to continue joining in, the info is in the chat, so you can do that. But let's get started here. All right, here's our meeting. Get ready. First, we want to know about the diversity of our audience. Have you been here with us before? All right, I think we'll still have answered. Let's go ahead and get to that. All right, we've got several of you who've been here for a couple of meetings, a couple of newbies, welcome. Some regulars, love to see that. So we have the whole spectrum here, excellent. Okay, so here is that holiday party question. So feel free to endorse more than one. If you are up for almost anything, you can put that in there. So we're looking at a non-public location, so it would just be us. Might be at a business, for example. We're looking at maybe a wine bar or brewery. We're considering the IO Arcade, which I believe is on Billy Street. Some of you may have been there. If you're up for whatever, that's one of the options. Or we know some of you may be joining from out of state and aren't local, or maybe you already have plans for the 12th, very sad, and won't be joining us. So you can pick that option if that fits you. All right, looks like we have some interest in where. Appreciate the flexibility. Also interest in the wine bar or brewery, and maybe some for the arcade. Okay, thank you. We will be sending out details very, very soon. We're looking at approximately a 4 p.m. start time. Again, that's next Tuesday. I really hope those of you who are local can join us. We'd love to hang out with you. Next item. So thinking ahead to next year, 2024, we've tried a variety of different venues. We generally have in-person meetings, but we're virtual this time. So if you have comments about virtual, you can put that in the chat. Otherwise, what kind of venue do you all think we should look for next year? Also have that flexibility option in the red. We usually get a corporate environment, but we've also tried park shelters and some other more casual locations too. So what do you all prefer? Sarah, I see in the text you're interested in the IO Arcade. Thank you for that. I have not been there myself, but I could go for some Pac-Man. I'm terrible, but I would give it a try. All right. Everybody's going to answered? I think so. Okay. A lot of interest in the virtual meetings or wherever. Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. And some of you care more about the location. If you are one of those who said you care more about the location in the city and you wouldn't mind, you could drop in the chat or private message me if you prefer, or email us at madison.tug@gmail.com. We would like to hear more about what that means for you. We want to make sure we make our meetings accessible to as many people as possible. And then our last two questions are more about the content of our upcoming meetings. So looking for a specific topic you'd want to know more about. If you have something that's been difficult for you or bothering you, that might be a good candidate for something you want us to dig into more. If you've been enjoying this type of chart series that we've been doing, you could answer that. That does only let you submit one answer, so go ahead and get all your thoughts in your response here. Also, happy to take info through email. Again, that was madison.tug@gmail.com. or private message here, or however you want to get us that feedback. I'll put the email in here. We try very hard to make these meetings interesting, helpful, informative, applicable. We know that some of you are newer on your Tableau journey, and others of you have been using the tool for a while. So we also try to hit content at a variety of levels. And it's just really helpful to us to know more specifically from you what it is that you want to learn more about or know more about. Got a few answers here. Turn the sound off on this thing. When I was testing it, the music was stressful, actually. It was making it sound like I had to hurry to get my answer in. The timer counting down is bad enough. I really didn't need the music giving you all anxiety either. Looks like we've got a few suggestions here. I'm excited to see what those are. The players type your answer, that exclamation mark that's pulsating is also a little stress inducing. So apologies for that. Ignore it if you're in the typing. We won't have time to talk about what you all put, but we will absolutely be reviewing these responses as a leadership team after the fact. All right, get those answers in if you have them. Right. Haven't seen any new ones come in quite a while. Let's go ahead and get to our next question. I will show the answers here. Certification, space optimization, joining, blends, charts, panels. Oh, these are some great ideas. I'm really excited to dig into these a little bit more. New features, demos, thank you. Appreciate it. We will take a closer look at those and hopefully be able to deliver most of those in our next meeting. All right, and then the last one, is there a particular person that you would like to hear from? It could be a big name like Andy Krubo, who participated in our September meeting remotely. It could be somebody local. We love to hear from local people. In fact, we'd love to hear from you. Could be somebody whose journey is similar to your own. We're open to whatever. Just let us know who we should be reaching out to that you'd like to hear from at these meetings. And if you are willing to present, please contact us. It doesn't have to be a big in-depth conversation or presentation, I should say. A little demo of something you've been working on is great. A problem you've solved. People love to get, who doesn't like a success story? It could be a feature that you get a lot of use out of, whatever. We're open to all of those kinds of things. And I think it's really important for the community to hear from each other. And it's a great professional development opportunity for you as well. Only seeing 4 answers so far. I'm not sure what to make of that. People maybe don't have anyone particular in mind, or maybe you're trying to remember who's presented on something you've already seen, what somebody's name is. If you're bad with names, this might be a little bit challenging of a question. Feel free to describe them. Oh, Kahoot kicked you out. Sorry about that. I don't know why it would do that. I need to list. There's no limit except for the 250 character limit, whatever it is. We'll just take one suggestion, Dustin. All right. I haven't seen any new answers come in here for a while either. Also an opportunity, feel free to direct message or send that by email. But it looks like maybe we've gotten all the suggestions we're going to get. Thank you for those of you who contributed. But I do see we are out of time, and I want to make sure we have time for our prize drawing. So let's get to that. So Olivia has been keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A and also our attendee list, and will let us know who our winners are here. Olivia, who have we got?
Give me just a second here, coming off mute. Hi, everybody. So we did this as randomly as possible. Everybody who contributed got entered into the list in the Q&A and chat, and I used a random number generator to determine who won. So Rocky and Paula are our 2 winners today. Congratulations from our chat and QA participants. Bravo. There's cheers echoing in the background. Yes, yeah, there we go. Appropriate environment. All right, so congratulations to you both. And then we also did a random drawing of everybody who checked in today. And our winner from our general attendance list was Trish Carey. So congratulations, Trish.
Yay, fantastic. So if you all would just send us a quick message with your email address, we'll follow up to get you your prize. Do need to be present to win. So can you say those names one more time, Olivia?
Yep, Rocky, Paula, and Trish.
Fantastic. Thank you all for participating and for being here. Hopefully you all be able to make it to our meeting next Tuesday. Also, just a quick plug, the Wisconsin Tug is having their next meeting virtually on January 23rd. Milwaukee will be in February, and we'll be back again in March. And also TC is coming up before you know it. I can't believe it's almost 2024. We've had a great time this year with you all. Hopefully we'll see you for our future meetings next year and next week at our party. Thanks, everybody.